UFC Fight Night, Moicano versus Denis. We have a French showcase this weekend in the UFC with these fights taking place in Paris. A lot of interesting matchups here. I'm going to just focus on the top, I think it is 7 or 8 fights here. I didn't have as much time to prepare for this week's video as I usually like to, but nevertheless, let's start breaking these down. First off, we're going to be talking about Ludovit Klein versus Roosevelt Roberts. Not a whole lot to discuss here. I think Ludovit should pretty much roll through Roberts. He's better on the ground. I think he can pretty much have his way with Roberts if he chooses to grapple with him. If it stays standing, I mean, Roberts has some reach. He's got a little bit of power, but I still think Ludovit is just the better guy here. He, I think, has genuine title aspirations versus Roosevelt Roberts, who's a bit of a journeyman, has had his fair amount of issues in the UFC. It's not like he's making a title run anytime soon, I don't think. So I think Ludovit is just way more locked into these two. Roberts is a short notice replacement on top of all that. The original matchup was going to be versus Nick Moda, who's a much more dangerous striker and possibly could have given Klein some more issues, but I don't think this one you really need to overthink. I think Ludovit is going to find a finish here. Oumar C versus Dawoon Jung is next up on the card. Oumar is a KSW alum, pretty reputable MMA organization based out of Poland, I believe. He's 10-0 overall, 1-0 in the UFC. Pretty much smothered his opponent Tuco Tokos in his debut. Completely handled him on the ground. You can tell C is just super athletic, super strong. He's got a long reach. I definitely think there are some question marks with his striking game on the feet, but his grappling is super strong already this short into his career. Dawoon Jung is on a 3-fight skid. He's a huge underdog. I still think, there's some... I'm definitely going to give Dawoon Jung a chance here versus a guy who's still has a lot of question marks in Oumar Sy. Only has had one UFC fight against a guy who I think was a lot worse than Dawoon Jung. How is Oumar Sy going to react if he can't take Dawoon Jung down? And these are all important questions that we need to be asking. Regardless, though, I think Sy will be able to drag Dawoon Jung sooner or later in this matchup, and I think it'll be pretty much over there. He's just going to smother him. So Sy by submission is going to be the pick there. Next up, we stay in the light heavyweight division. It's Jung Cutelaba taking on Ivan Erslan, a fellow KSW alum of Oumar Sy. This guy's definitely at a much different point in his career, though. I believe he's fought for titles in KSW. He's got more fights under his belt. He's the older guy. I like Erslan's game. His striking looks solid. He looks like he's got fast hands. He's not the tallest guy, but he's big. I don't think Cutelaba is going to be able to just kind of manhandle him and grapple him, which is usually Cutelaba's best chance in a fight. And I've just seen Cutelaba struggle against good strikers so many times. We're taking Erslan by KO. I think the UFC is giving him a well-established guy because they know he can handle that, and maybe they see something in the guy. They're always looking for more exciting light heavyweights, and this could be a good matchup for Erslan to kind of show off his game. Next up is Farés Ziam versus Matt Frevola. Ziam has looked solid in his return to the UFC. There was a couple years there, or a year or so, where he was not in the UFC, but it definitely seems like he was focused and locked in that time away from the UFC because he came back and he's on a 3-fight win streak. Matt Frevola is a super hard guy to prepare for. I mean, Ziam has fought Terrence McKinney, who I think is the most similar to Matt Frevola, but even then, it's just impossible to prepare for a guy as aggressive and wild as Frevola. He's going to bring a fight, and he's always going to have his chance in a dogfight. Obviously, he had that matchup versus Benoît Saint Denis where it was just like, whoever lands first is going to win that fight. That all being said, I think Ziam is the younger guy. I think he's the faster, more explosive guy just in his youth. And I think he's just at a better point in his career. Frevola's taken a lot of damage. We haven't really seen that from Ziam. And I think he's just going to be the more technical guy here. I think he wins a decision versus Matt Frevola in front of his home crowd. Next up, it is Morgan Charrière versus Gabriel Miranda. Charrière lost a close fight to Chepe Mariscal. It was a split decision loss there. I scored it for Chepe, but it was super close. He's a really well-rounded guy. He's got good kicks, decent size for the division. Kind of feels like to me that the UFC just kind of queued up Gabriel Miranda to just guarantee that a Frenchman gets a win in this event. Charrière, I think, is just going to be the more skilled guy. Miranda, I think, kind of needs something spectacular to happen to take this one. Charrière is just too solid. I'm taking Charrière by decision. Next up, we have a welterweight matchup between Kevin Jousset and Bryan Battle. I expect this to be pretty much fought on the feet the whole way through, even though Jousset, I believe, has a judo background. Jousset did not really impress me in his debut. I thought he looked stiff as a board, just kind of awkward on the feet. But he still went out there and got a submission win and looked good in his follow-up fight versus, I believe it was San Kanan. He's impressed me with his striking, but I still worry a lot about just kind of how robotic he is. It feels like his head is just asking to be punched pretty much. There's no head movement really at all. He's a pretty still target. Bryan Battle is just so much looser. I think he's just going to be the better striker. If this turns into a slugfest, I think Bryan Battle wins. He's just going to be a little bit cleaner, a little bit quicker. And if this is a bit more of a technical affair, I still think Bryan Battle is going to get the best of Kevin Jousset. So I'm taking Battle to win this one by KO. I just worry about Jousset's head movement. I think Battle is super skilled, a really interesting guy in this 170 division. The only guy to beat him is Fakhretdinov, which is a really tough matchup versus a guy who's been wrestling his entire life. Battle, I think, got a bit of a later start to the fight game, but he's really impressed me. Next up is William Gomis versus Joanderson Brito in the featherweight division. Brito, that dude is scary as heck. He's super explosive. Pretty much exploded Jack Shore's leg in their matchup, something I've never seen before or since in the UFC. Someone just that much blood. It looked like a bullet wound or something. Absolutely crazy. And that just shows how powerful he is. He's a guy who he can kind of stuff you up against the cage, do damage there. He's got a few submission wins as well, so it's hard to really be comfortable trying to grapple with the guy. Gomis is, I think, going to be an interesting matchup for Brito. He's really long. He does some of his own kind of interesting unorthodox techniques, kind of like a karate, kung fu style at times. But he also knows how to, looks like he has solid fundamentals as well. He kind of passes the eye test in that sense. Should be a really tough matchup, but for me, power kind of trumps all, especially in this matchup. I don't know if Gomis is going to be able to keep Joanderson Brito off of him, and Brito is just going to force the issue, force Gomis into exchanges, and Brito is just far more powerful. I think he finds a KO here. Next up, we have our co-main event. It is Nassourdine Imavov taking on Brendan Allen. Imavov really impressed me versus Jared Cannonier. I did pick Cannonier to win that fight. I just thought his experience and power would kind of carry him through that one. But Imavov fought definitely his best fight to date. He was coming off of that win over Roman Dolidze, a guy with a very limited striking skill set, taking on one of the better technical strikers in the middleweight division in Jared Cannonier, and he really put it on him. He showed a lot of power that we hadn't really seen up to that point, and he also just showed how effective he can be at range with his boxing combinations. He doesn't really throw long combinations. He kind of sticks to his jab and the cross, but that's really all he needed in that fight versus Cannonier. He knew when to sit down on his punches a little bit more. Ended up getting the KO. Really impressive performance. Brendan Allen, on the other hand, is another guy who's super well-rounded. Obviously, he's got a super strong jiu-jitsu pedigree. He just went down to the wire versus Chris Curtis. Curtis is, absolutely one of the toughest guys. I think he's just such a hard matchup for some of these middleweights because they're just not used to fighting a guy of that stature. They're kind of punching down on him, and he's got such slick boxing that he really was giving Brendan Allen fits. Allen showed a lot of dog in that fight. It was definitely down to the wire, and he just kind of had that little extra gear that Chris Curtis didn't to get the win there. That all being said, I think Imavov just has the easier path to victory here. Defend the takedowns, and really just put the pace on Brendan Allen on the feet. I think he's the better striker here. I think he punches harder. I think he's going to be landing much more often. And Brendan Allen, if he tries to sell out for a takedown, that's just going to sap his gas tank really quick. And Imavov is going to be able to put the pace on him. We're taking Imavov to win this one by decision. Finally, we have our main event. It is Renato Moicano versus Benoît Saint-Denis. I really like this matchup. BSD kind of got exposed on the feet versus Poirier. I say that obviously with a grain of salt because many men have been schooled on the feet by Dustin Poirier, so I'm not trying to knock BSD too much for that, but he certainly showed some of his limitations in his stand-up game there. Obviously, BSD's super destructive. He pretty much only wins by finish, and he's knocked a bunch of people out. Obviously, he had that head kick KO over Matt Frevola. I believe he fought Gabriel Miranda as well, if I remember correctly, and just put it on him. His hands looked really good in that fight. But versus guys with more of a boxing skill set, like Poirier, I think we've seen that, he can kind of get exposed there. He doesn't have a really good jab at all. He kind of only throws power punches and leaves a lot of openings. Like we've seen him get hit many times now over just kind of being overzealous. So yeah, obviously Poirier is an absolute dog. Moicano is not going to have the power that Poirier has, even close, or just the slickness on the feet. But I do think Moicano is going to be a challenging striker versus BSD. Moicano does have that grappling skill set and the jiu-jitsu to rely on as well, but I think BSD is honestly biggest advantage and path to victory in there here is going to be in the grappling, because I think he's going to be the more physically imposing guy. Moicano had that crazy fight with Jalen Turner, was able to take him down and just once he got on top of Jalen Turner, Turner really had no answer. So his top control is really a strong suit in his game, but I just don't see him being able to get in those positions versus BSD. BSD's taken down guys like the Bonfils before. I think it was Gabriel Bonfim, and showed just how physically imposing he is. I mean, if he's handling Thiago Moises, I have reason to believe that he can handle Moicano on the ground as well. Super tough match here. I definitely think the longer it goes, the more it benefits Moicano, but we've seen Moicano get cracked a few times. We're taking BSD by KO. I think the feed is going to be pretty evenly matched. He might land the harder shots, but Moicano is going to be landing more often. But I think at some point in this fight, BSD is just going to muscle Moicano to the ground and finish him with ground and pound. So with that is the breakdown. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you on the next one.